Okay, hi everybody. Welcome to today's event. I'm Jason Gumpert from msdynamicsworld.com, and I'm really pleased to be able to welcome you all to this session all about the upgrade versus migration challenge when it comes to moving from AX to Dynamics 365. Uh, our presenters today are Michael Oakes and Amir Koshniati from Avantico. It's great to have them with us. And we do want to keep this a fairly interactive session. We want to get your input and we want to hear your questions. I'm going to launch a poll now with just a couple of basic questions just to get a little more input from you on your views and your sort of situation where you're at with the products today. If you could provide any feedback, that would just sort of help shape the conversation, I think, a little bit. We do also want to take your questions, and you can enter those at any point throughout the session. Michael and Amir will be leaving time at the end to answer those, so just enter them any time. I'll leave this poll up for another 30 seconds or so, so please do fill in your answers. But while we do that, I'm going to hand things off to Amir to get us started. So Amir, welcome to the event.
Great. Thank you, Jason. Just want to test the audio, make sure everything is coming in clear.
Yeah, you sound good.
Great. And thank you all for completing the poll questions. This is going to help us kind of guide the presentation. We're going to touch on all these topics, especially on the different versions that you guys are sitting on, but at least it will help us maybe spend a little more time on certain sections based on what you guys select. So just wait till we close that out. What do we have, Jason? Another 10 seconds or so?
Yep, no, I'm closing it out now, and we're at, let me see here.
Let's see how the results turn out. Great.
So we're kind of spread out.
Yep, kind of even distribution, which is good. So we will touch on all these topics. Let's see. Okay, so good split between 09 and R2 and R3. And a lot of you guys are looking to move either between the next 6 months or so, or between about a year to 2 plus years. Okay, great. So just a quick intro on who I am. My name is Amir Koshniati. I'm the marketing and sales lead over at Avantico. I am joined here with Michael Oakes, who is our technical architect. I'll be passing over the reins to him very shortly, and he'll be doing the heavy lifting during today's webcast. Just before we get started, I'd like to tell you guys a little bit more about who we are as an organization, and then pass it over to Michael. So we were formerly known as AX Mentor, and we recently rebranded to Avantico. So if the name is familiar, or the name isn't familiar, AX Mentor may be on your radar. So we basically rebranded to realign not only with Microsoft, but within the product stack as well, to be a little more horizontal. But AX Mentor was founded back in 2006. We've been a Microsoft certified partner ever since. We have members of our team who are part of the TAP program and also MVPs within the channel. We are heavily involved with the user group community, as well as Adam and Jason's team with Dynamics World. We have board members spanning both the 365 and AXUG side and the CRMUG side. We are headquartered in sunny San Diego, California, and we have a very West Coast focus with offices spanning up the coast through Temecula, Irvine, Los Angeles, and we also have a European presence in Denmark and London, UK. Our vertical expertise is mainly around manufacturing and distribution, but we also have a lot of competencies around professional financial services, retail and e-commerce, and then also public sector practice group. We are a full stack partner, as mentioned, and that's part of the realignment with the new organization under Avantico. We focus on 365, AX, and CRM, everything from road mapping services, the discussion really around today on how to get you to the next version, all the way through full implementation life cycles, and then post-live support and managed support services. And we also have a couple add-on products. I just want to quickly mention those. We have an address verification validation solution. It also acts as a data migration tool if you're looking to move and validate your data from a QA standpoint. We have a workflow app that helps you approve any kind of workflow. within the palm of your hand through a iOS service through Apple, and then we also have an advanced public protection module. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Michael Oakes to basically conduct today's webcast. And if you guys do have questions, as Jason mentioned, please log them in that side menu. We have a couple moderators standing by, and we will get to them either through the webcast, and we'll have a good Q&A session at the tail end. So with that, Michael, the floor is yours.
Thanks, Amir. Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Oakes. I'm an architect at Avantico. My background is I've been working with Dynamics 365 and Dynamics AX since version 1. One of the very first implementations in the United Kingdom. That's all I've done my entire career is Dynamics AX, Dynamics 365. Complex integrations, customizations, and upgrades. And that's why we're here today. Despite my accent, I moved to the US in 2002, and I'm based in San Diego. So we're going to be talking today about what are our options for moving to 365. We'll talk a little bit about 365, some of the differences, what are the options for 2012, 2009, and even 4.0. But we're also going to be talking about customizations because this is a hot topic right now, and there was a real wonderful webinar last week on this topic, and we'll touch briefly about that. So 365, if you're here, you should have a little bit of information about this. This is Microsoft's Azure or cloud-based version of AX that they've now branded Dynamics 365 for operations and finance. It's a bit of a mouthful, but essentially this is Dynamics AX. The database schema and the concepts are built around Dynamics AX 2012 R3. So if you're running Dynamics AX 2012, you're going to be familiar with financial dimensions and surrogate keys and the global address book and the address framework and all of the denormalized tables. So that data structure has largely been kept in 365. But there are some differences. It's a cloud-based ERP system in Azure. The code now has been moved into Visual Studio. The X++ concepts are the same. So if you have a piece of code or a method in AX 2009 or 2012, you can expect to read that same kind of code in 365. But the code now is based on disk. It's been moved from the model store, the database in 2012 to XML files. It's now linked to version control, online version control, VSO, or what it's called now is VSTS. And there is a new development philosophy called extensions. And this is very, very important to understand this. Most of the customers, most of the implementations we see, they are customized. And Microsoft are asking the customers and partners to really rethink about how they deliver those customizations. And it's called extensions. And we'll talk briefly about that because that will have an impact on how you migrate to 365. So let's just step back a little bit. In 2009 and 4.0 and 3.0, since the very beginning of AX, you can customize the system. Microsoft would deliver the code in a layer, a sys layer, for example, and you would then overlay your code on top of that. So if you modified the customer screen, your customization would literally sit on top of Microsoft's code. So these layers in 2009 and 4.0, these were AOD files, application object data files, stored on disk. The problem is Microsoft, if they were to add an update, a service pack, if you've already overlaid that code in the curse or the var layer, you won't see that code. You won't see Microsoft's update because you're running an overlaid version on top of that. How do you get around that? Well, you need a developer to merge that code, merge that SIP layer code or that GLS code with your overlaid code. And that's a very expensive and painful process. And because of that, a lot of people said, you know what, we can't apply this update because we have to merge all of our customizations again, go through all the testing just to get this little bit of functionality. So the return on the investment may not be there, so people say, I'm just not going to do that. In AX 2012, the problem is still kind of there. They made a lot of architecture changes in 2012. The code was moved to a database, the model store. And a lot of people would create these models. It addressed some issues, but it did not fix them all. We've seen issues where people accidentally are in the wrong model. It's very easy to switch between the models or start AX up in the wrong model. There were some issues with version controls if you used multiple models in the same layer. And it was still overlayering. So again, if you modified a standard object, if a hotfix came out, you've got to merge that and go through that process. So what's the difference in 365? What are Microsoft trying to do? Microsoft want to increase the cadence that they release these updates, but they want the customers to take advantage of these updates without having to go through this painful process of remerging their code. So they've introduced this extensibility concept, which we'll talk about in the next slide. The idea of this would be that you don't modify the standard code, you would create an extension to that. The problem with this is that when AX7 first came out, it was optional. So a lot of people jumped to 365, they created their customizations, they overlaid the standard code. And that's fine, and a lot of ISV solutions have done that, and a lot of customers and partners have done that. Then Microsoft has started to say, well, hang on, we really don't want to do that anymore. So they're asking the partners and the ISV solutions to move from a overlaying to an extensioning. And they've created a roadmap, what's called the SEAL roadmap, which you can see in the top right here. So if you're currently running 365 and you've overlaid it, eventually you will not be able to do that. So in the bottom right-hand corner, what I did is I went into Platform Update 12, I right-clicked and I tried to customize or overlay a standard object, and it's telling me it's being deprecated and I have to extend that, or really I should extend that. So the goal really should be that we should be doing extension and avoiding customizations or overlaying. Why is this important in an upgrade? Well, if you're running AX 2009, 4.0, AX 2012, and you've overlayered a standard Microsoft code, the recommendation will be you'll have to move that to an extension. That could be a significant undertaking. There is help. There is help with your partner, and there's also help from Microsoft. So if you've got a piece of code that you've modified AX, that you've overlaid that, and you really need that, Microsoft do have an invitation program where you can request that they can refactor their code or provide some hook or mechanism to allow you to keep that modification without overlaying the code. So there's a lot of changes in 365. Microsoft are sealing the code from customization. 365 works very well with version control and work items or tasks to link your code to during the check-in process and to help manage and track your customizations. This is a big difference going forward. And again, what is the difference between an extension and overlaying? So the easiest way to explain this is with Dynamics AX 2012, 2009, 4.0. Imagine if you modify the standard code, imagine if that code was in a file, you're modifying that file. With an extension, you're not modifying that code or not modifying that file. You're creating a separate code, a separate file with some kind of hook into the first one. It could be a chain of command, it could be a inline delegate, it could be some other system integration. The benefit of that, though, is Microsoft can continue their development and you can do your development side by side unimpeded. So even though if the standard code or the standard logic changes, Microsoft apply an update, you won't be affected because you've not overlaid that code, you've created a hook into it. So there's some significant benefits for taking advantage of updates, new features, hot fixes, functionality from Microsoft, and they can continue to deliver their updates without having to worry about your customizations. So it does reduce the cost of not just upgrading to a new version, but just staying current, applying updates to the system, and it reduces this costly code upgrade every time Microsoft apply an update. So we're going to be talking today about what are your options for getting to 365, and we'll talk at a very high level 3 options. One is we can do what's called the classic upgrade, where you take all of your code or all of your customizations and your entire transaction history and move it. Just like if you were going from AX 2009 to 2012, you want to do a full upgrade. You want to keep your entire history, maybe for auditing, maybe you need that information. What happens if you're on an earlier version, 2009, there are tools available to migrate key data. And we'll talk briefly about that. Of course, you can re-implement. You can or just spin up a new version of 365 and start again. There are tools available for this third option, and we will talk briefly about that. They are data packages and data entities. So if you are starting again a clean instance of 365, there are tools available to migrate over, some of your key data, your customers, your vendors, things like that. So we will go through that as well. So let's talk a little bit about 2012. We'll start at a high level, and then we'll go into some more details. So what are the options? If you're running AX 2012, you've got 2012, RTM, R2, and R3. When Microsoft announced their upgrade path, initially it was only for R3, but they've recently added support for 2012 R2. So if you're on 2012 R2 or R3, there is a upgrade path for your code and your data to get to D365. With a caveat, there are some deprecated features, which we will talk about later, which will prevent you from doing this. So if you have data partitions or virtual company accounts, currently that's not supported. It may be supported in the future, but it's not supported right now. That will prevent you from taking advantage of this. But essentially, if you're on R2 or R3, you do have the option for moving your code and your data to D365. Of course, we have to look at the customizations. Because of this extensioning and overlaying discussion that's going on right now, there could be a significant impact to move some of your overlay code to a extension. There is the option to upgrade. Of course, you can always re-implement as well. So if you want to re-implement, what are the options for doing that? So you've got the upgrade path, which we will go into more detail. If you do want to look at purely, a re-implementation, what are my options for moving data? And so if we look here, there is in 2012, in D365, there is a data management framework to import data. And one of the concepts that I would ask you to become familiar with is data entities. What's a data entity? We know in AX, especially in 2012, they denormalized the table. So the customer, if you look at the customer screen, there's over 20 data sources, from the global address book for the name, for the address, logistics address framework for the address, and a whole bunch of other tables to do that. So to integrate or to interact with that customer, if I wanted to import data, they've created an entity. And think of this as a SQL view or a logical view of that denormalized table to abstract that. So you don't need to worry about the joins, the inner joins, the outer joins, where that table is. Microsoft have shipped hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these entities that represent these concepts. And these data entities are not just for reading information, you can use it for creating and updating data. So it's a logical denormalized view that you can also write to. So you have various options, but we'll talk about this a little bit later on, but there's a mechanism for you to take these data entities and import that into D365 for your data migration. So you could use that for loading your customers or your customer groups or your vendors or your item master. You can also use these data entities for ongoing integration, and it's a mechanism for integrating as well as data migration. Very important concept. It was kind of introduced in 2012, but it's been expanded significantly into D365. So if we just step back a little bit, so how do you know if your current version of 2012 is compatible? Well, there is an analyzer tool that you can install and run, and it will kind of tell you, yes, you're okay to go, or no, you're going to get some problems. So what are the paths to 2012? So again, you can re-implement, maybe, and this is not an exhaustive list, but maybe you decide, you know what, we don't need the transactional history, or we've got these customizations and they're a baggage and we don't want to keep them, or we're going to change our ISV solution, or we're going to try and, they're not compatible, or we're going to try and stay with standard, other reasons as well. You can, of course, do what's called the classic upgrade, where maybe you're compatible, you've got low customizations, there's a requirement to keep the data, you run the analyzer tool, you're okay, we can do that. Of course, you can do a hybrid. In other words, you could say, you know what, we'll use the code upgrade to upgrade the code, but we will use the data entities to manually bring over some of the key base data, customers, vendors, chart of accounts. So they're really the three options. If you're an RTM, there's no direct upgrade. So what about 2009? Well, in 2009, there's no full upgrade available. So you cannot take your 2009 code and your data and move it all to 365. So what are your options? Option one, of course, is you can re-implement. So you would spin up a new version. You can still have the data packages. You can still have the data entities. You can still load configuration data, base data, customers, vendors, open sales orders, whatever that is, away you go. There is a second option, which is a data migration tool. Microsoft have released a migration data tool in 2009. It's a small XPO that you put in, and it creates data packages. It syncs to 365, and it can take these data packages, which is a collection of data entities, customers, vendors, chart of accounts, all of that, and actually import that. It won't do the code, but it will do selected data to bring that across. The benefit of that X++ is you can see that code, you can modify it. Maybe if you have a custom entity or a custom table you want bringing, you can go ahead and do that. Option three, if you really, really wanted to keep everything, if you had a requirement, you were on 2009 or 4.0 for that matter, and you wanted your code and your data, it is possible, but you are looking at a double upgrade. You would have to upgrade from 2009 to 2012 R3, for example, run all of the upgrade, all of the data, all of the code, and then run R3 to 365. In my opinion, that would be a significant undertaking. A few years ago, we had a customer on 3.0 that wanted to go to 2012. Now, that wasn't a supported upgrade path. So in one weekend, we did a double upgrade to go live. We went from 3 to 4 and 4 to 2012. We ran 2 separate sets of upgrade scripts to get them in. And we got it in, but that was a significant undertaking and a lot of work to tune those scripts so they could all run in the go live weekend. So yes, it's possible. If you're on 2009, again, it's only for the data, and there's a tool which I will show you later, and you bring over select data only using a tool stack. We could do the double upgrade. That's a significant undertaking. Again, if the upgrade script fails, where is it in 2009 to 2012, or is it 2012 to 365? But it is possible. Of course, you can re-implement as well. So maybe you want to just start with a clean instance of 365, use the data management framework in 365 to bring over the data you need. And there is a comprehensive tool set and entity list to help you do that. If you're on 4.0, it's similar to 2009. There is no direct upgrade currently. Now, the tool set that Microsoft have applied for the data upgrade in 2009 is not currently available in 4.0. We don't know if there's any plans to migrate that, but currently the tool set, which we'll show you later on, is only available in 2009. So again, if you're running 4.0, what are your options? Again, re-implement, and then you can use the data management framework to load in your key selected, sort of base data, or you can do a double upgrade. I would imagine the easiest would be to go from 4.0 to 2009, and then from 2009 to use the tool from Microsoft. If you wanted the full transaction history, the full code, you're going to have to go from 4 to 2012 R3, and then R3 to 365. Again, it's possible, but a significant undertaking. So again, the double upgrade is there. If you need that, all of that transactional history, everything there, there's a legal or auditing or business decision to do that. Yes, we can, but you're looking at a significant work to get that in, to tune the upgrade from 4 to 2012 so it can run in a very quick time, and then from 2012 to 365. The other option, of course, is you can go from 4 to 2009 and then run Microsoft's tool, which they have, which we'll show in a few minutes, to bring in that key selected data. And this tool just creates these data packages that you load into 365. So, of course, we can always re-implement as well. 4.0 is a very old system. A lot has changed. A lot of the business processes have changed. A lot of the table structures have changed. If your other options don't work, then you're looking at a re-implementation. So let's look at the tool from Microsoft. Microsoft have this tool, which will show you. I actually have 2009 running, but it's selected data only. So you're looking at master data and some of your base transactional data. So open balances, customers, vendors, open sales orders, system configuration. You can bring over custom tables and custom fields as well if you wanted to. So what it is you get a KB or an XPO from Microsoft. You put it into 2009. You install some extra components. I think there's some SQL components that you need. And then you spin up 365 and you make them talk to each other. So you set up a connection on 2009 connecting to your target 365, and it will create the data packages or the data entities, and it will start synchronizing or giving the ability to move that AX 2009 information to 365. What it ships with is a CSV or an Excel file with a list of defaults, which we'll show you in the next slide. So what I like about this is X++, if you've got a developer, he can read that, he can see that, he can modify that, he can tune that, he can extend that if he wants to. But what it ultimately produces is a data package. And a data package is a 365 concept. It's just data from one or more entities. So you may have a package for your customers and your customer groups, and you may have another one for vendors and vendor groups. It can do a one-time job, or it can even handle deltas through the modified datetime. It can be a single process for setup data. It can be an iterative process for larger transactional data. So let's take a look. I've got a slide, but we've also got it running in here. So essentially what you would do is you would install this very small XPO. And even though this is called generate maps, this is your parameter table, and you connect to the 365 instance. So you would go into here and you would connect your 365 instance there. You would validate that, and then you can start moving that information. And it does ship with this configuration file. So this is the configuration file here. So if you wanted to, bring in your open sales orders, we'll see there will be a source query there which would be your open sales orders. And you can modify this. So there's this bringing over your item groups. There's some there for your forecasting. You'll see one for your open sales orders, your unit conversions. So this is the standard configuration file. You load this in to AX 2009. So again, you load in that, you configure the defaults. On the right-hand screen, this is where you configure your source or your 365 environment. You enter what's called an app ID that's set up in Azure, and that has a connection to 365, username and a password. And then you go through the various different setups. So you migrate the company accounts, and it gives you a bit of information about how many records in there, row counts, things like that. You would go through some data conversions, so maybe extended data types or base enums have changed. You can go and convert, from an AX EDT to a 365 EDT. You can map your financial dimensions, your inventory dimensions, chart of accounts, and ledger configurations, and then any other mapping you have. So example here, this is the screen we took the Excel file, we imported that into the defaults, and you'll see in the right-hand side, if you want to bring over your open sales orders, then this is it right here. Select star from sales table, where sales table is 1. And you can modify that. So if you wanted to include only sales orders that exclude journals, or exclude return sales orders, or maybe bring over fully invoiced ones for the history, you have the option to modify that one there. We actually worked with Microsoft in Seattle when they were building this, and we gave them a little bit of feedback to help redesign this. We asked them to add a few extra columns so we know which configurations have a custom query and which ones are going to pull the entire table, for example. So we gave them a little bit of feedback. So these screens may change when you get the final version. So in 2009, again, your options are you can re-implement, you can use the tools from Microsoft for the data packages, or you can use the data packages in 365 through Lifecycle Services to import key sort of setup or key transactional data. So let's jump to 2012. So let's see if you make the decision to upgrade from 2012 to 365, a full upgrade, transactional history and code, what are the steps involved? What can you do? So there's really 3 phases: analyze, execute, and validate. What are these phases and what do we do? Well, the first phase is analyze. This is where we do some high-level analysis. So we would run the upgrade analyzer tool. Is it okay? What customizations do we have? What is the estimated effort to move those? Let's create a plan. Then we would execute that. We would do a code upgrade and then the data upgrade, and then we would cut over and go live. So we're going to talk about these in the next slides and how these would play out. So there's a lot of information. What I would say is this information is changing. It's currently evolving. R2 is very recently being added. To get the latest information, I would refer everyone to this upgrade overview in 2012. So just to show you where that is, this is the upgrade overview from Microsoft. Again, it's constantly changing. Have a look at this one here. This is where we get all of the high-level steps, upgrading the code, upgrading the data, deprecated features, and what are the conditions if you're running retail, if you're not running retail. There's different paths depending on your individual situation. So there are some differences. So again, we'll look at analyze, perform, prepare, restore, and run. So the analyze phase is what we would do is we would analyze our code. Why do we want to do that? We want a high-level overview is, what customizations do we have, and what is the effort to move this to 365. So Microsoft have a tool on lifecycle services. And if you're not familiar with lifecycle services or LCS, then that's something that I would ask you to look at. At a high level, what it is, it's an online collaborative workspace for the customer, for the partner, to help manage their 365 implementation. You can use it for moving code. You can use it for applying updates or hotfixes. You can use it to applying Microsoft hotfixes, your hotfixes, your updates. You can use it to look at the health of the system. Analytics, some analytics are on there for performance. And you use it to apply data, packages to update data, for example. And there's a whole bunch of other stuff. You can use it to provision environments, new development environments, new sandbox environments. So the first thing is you want to do is analyze. So what you can do in 2012 is you can take your entire model store, not a model, the entire model store, your entire code base, zip it up and send it to Microsoft. And what they'll do is they'll analyze that and give you a report, a very, very high level report about what customizations you have, what overlaying you have. And the benefit of this is if you link this up to version control or VSTS, it will actually create tickets for you or work items about them. So you can actually start managing that process as well. And it will give you a estimate only. And so if we take a look at that, it will give you an estimate. So it will go through and give you a report of a high level, a report of what you've got and what it thinks the effort is. But it is only an estimate. Again, Microsoft are asking people to move from a customization overlaying model to an extension model. So there could be significant work in migrating that. You also may want to decide you're going to change or remove ISV solutions. There could be a significant amount of work involved in that. But at a high level, what it's going to do, it's going to give you some projects and some high-level reporting. And you'll see here, it will tell you, it can also actually upgrade that code for you. So what this will do is it will take your AX 2012 code in the model store database, convert that to 365 code where it can to XML-based 365 code, check it into version control. Now, if it can do it, it will do it. If it says, hey, you need to merge this because it's overlaying, it will create that in a separate project for you. If for some reason it can't understand or can't figure out what that code is, then it's going to create it into a separate solution for you. So it's actually going to try and do that. But it's very important to note it cannot do everything. If you have an external integration, this tool doesn't know that. You have to refactor that. If you have overlaying and you need to move that to extensioning, yes, it will try and do that, but if there's no suitable hook or delegate, you're going to have to refactor that code yourself. So it can do a lot of stuff, and you can use that for the basis, but this tool will take it, but it will take everything in 2012, your entire model store. So it will give you a report. It will tell you how many controls it's updated, what the conflicts are, and it will give you a summary. So if you've got some code conflicts through an overlaying that need moving to an extension, it will tell you that one. Anything it cannot upgrade, you'll see, it will tell you that. But it will create work items for you in Visual Studio so you can help manage that process as well. Are these numbers accurate? I would say it's a high-level estimate, but the devil is always in the detail, especially if you have to move from overlaying to extensioning, and especially if you have to start moving or changing your ISV solutions. So maybe you move from on-premise sales tax calculation to the cloud-based version. Okay, well, we may have to change that code, write custom data scripts to handle that, all kinds of stuff. So the refactoring could be a significant undertaking there. So it can't do everything. So some customization is no longer supported. So do expect to convert your code There are some tools available, inline delegates, chain of command, and this area is constantly evolving from Microsoft. There is an invitation program from Microsoft where you can request that they refactor their code. There's also a really good Yammer group for Microsoft, a very good discussion group where all the developers and technical people are talking about extensioning and the issues they're getting and how to move from a overlaying to an extension. So I would recommend people get involved in that process and get involved in that discussion during the migration. Like we're saying, if you're on 2012, there are deprecated features. So the Enterprise Portal is gone, some ActiveX controls are gone, Direct SQL through Azure database is no longer supported. Some of the AIF, AXD classes are gone. It's important to note, though, yes, the AIF classes have gone and the AXD document-based integration code is gone, but the web services are still there. So if you're in 2012 and you have an AOS-hosted web service or web service group, that is upgradable and that is supported in 365. It's output as SOAP and now it's also outputted as JSON as well. So I think there's a little bit of confusion. People say, oh, AIF is deprecated, so there's no web service. That's not true. Web services are supported in 365. Some deprecated features, virtual company accounts, data partitions, and role centers. It's not exhausted. There is a very, very thorough document below for some of those deprecated features. So definitely worth recommend you read that and take a look at that for more information. So again, if we do the code upgrade, what are our options? How do we do it? We always first upgrade the code and then we upgrade the data. So we would pull out our ISV solutions or anything we don't need, and maybe you can remove your new functionality, or customizations are replaced for new functionality, remove the junk, and then now you have a smaller model store, you could then upload that to LCS for the upgrade. So because the whole model store has to be updated to LCS, it is possible to spin up a separate environment for the code, to strip out what's needed to get just the customizations you want to uplift, and then push that up into LCS, create the work items, create the XML files to 365, and migrate those as well. So recommendation would be to look at your existing customizations. What is not needed? What could you remove for new functionality? What could you replace with a new ISV solution or drop an ISV solution? So again, we would do the code first. Then we would do the data. So there is a data upgrade framework. It's very, very similar than the standard upgrade framework in previous systems where you have the release update classes in AX. But there are some differences. So what we're going to do is we'll just go through this process now and see. So in 2012, if you wanted to upgrade your data, you install a hotfix or KB or an XPO, and you'll see that here. There's a little checklist on there. And essentially what it's going to do, it's just going to validate that you're supported. It's going to prepare some model metadata. We'll talk about that in a minute. And it's going to do some user mapping. It's just going to prepare your 2012 database so the data can be upgraded. So in 365, there's no model store. The code is all on XML disks, but there's certain information in the model store that 365 needs. It needs to validate object IDs and element IDs during the upgrade. So to do that, what you do is you run this script. It will take your model store, some information from that model store, and actually insert it into your transactional database, into a shadow table. And that way, when your transactional database is upgraded to D365, it has that metadata it needs. So it knows about some of the object IDs and element IDs. So again, the model database is left behind. It's not upgraded. It's only the transactional database. But we do need some information from this model database for the upgrade. So to do that is one of the tools is it takes some information from the model database, puts it into your transactional database, and then during the upgrade will take some of that information. So again, this is the code. You map some of your network aliases. So this is your AX user ID to your, now you log in through an email. And there's some other stuff. So again, we prepare the data. So the first thing is we do, is we go back, is we prepare the data to the 2012 system. How do we get that to 365? Well, it's a difference between development, sandbox, and production in 365. A public sandbox or a production system of 365 uses SQL or Azure database. A development system, a local VHD development system, would use the on-premise SQL Server. So you've got the on-premise SQL Server and the cloud Azure-based SQL database, and they are different. So when you're doing this data run first, you would do it in a development system. You would use that to catch out any bugs, any problems. Maybe a field wasn't mapped correctly, or maybe you have another table and it's blank because there's a problem with some data or something failed. So you would always import the data into a development system first. And then once you've got that ironed out, then you do it in a public sandbox. So what are the high-level steps? Well, the first thing is, of course, you would prepare your 2012 database in the previous slide. You would run this script, take the modern store and put it into the transactional database. Then what you would do is you would upload this to Azure Storage. This is for the development system now. This is not for Sandbox. You would upload it to Azure Storage. Then you would go to your development system. You would download it back into your development system in 365. You would run some data upgrade scripts in 365, and your development system is now done. So again, you prepare the database, Azure Storage, dev system, execute the data storage. So let's take a look. So you would back it up, Azure Storage, and there's a tool, command line tells you do that. You would do a regular backup and run the deployable package, the data deployable package. This would upgrade the data in your development system. And then you can take a look. Maybe some of those data scripts fail. That's fine. You can mark them as failed and continue afterwards. You can start working through the errors. When we ran this internally, we got some errors due to duplicate key problems with some tables. So we disabled the index. We ran through it. We figured it out, gave the feedback to Microsoft, and carried on. So that's the high-level process of doing that in a dev system. And again, there's we've got a link to the data upgrade process there on Microsoft's website there. So you would just go ahead, have a look at this one here, go through that information as well there. So once you've done that in a dev system, you will do that, of course, in a sandbox. If we take a look at the dev system, this is the data package. This is the last step. So if we go back, this is this data package here. And it's a combination of, I think, command lines and PowerShell scripts. And this is changing. I know Microsoft are working on automating this and changing this. So I expect this to change over time to be automated. Some of the steps are manual. But you would run this and it would tell you if any steps failed and restep them. But essentially, you go ahead in your dev system, you would push through that. In a sandbox, it's different. Again, the sandbox will be running the Azure database or the Azure version of SQL Server. So SQL Server is on-premise. SQL database is actually Azure. So if you see those terminology, be very, very careful. SQL Server is the on-premise. SQL database is the Azure SQL database. So you have to do different steps because they're different. So if you're running in the sandbox, you have to, again, you would run through that step and preparing your data. You have to run a different export, and you have to prepare your database. You run a couple of scripts from Microsoft, and they're on the website. You would do a different backup, a backpack backup, load it to Azure Storage, download that and import that, run another bunch of SQL scripts, execute the data upgrade scripts. So it's slightly different than the VHD on-premise SQL Server. But at a high level, the steps are quite similar. So again, you would create a copy of the database. Microsoft recommend that because we have to modify some data. We'll run some scripts. We will do a special export using SQL package exe. We will upload that to Azure Storage. We will download that to the Sandbox, run a script against that, and run the data upgrade package. And make sure you pick the right one. When we did that, we picked the wrong one. We have some problems. So you have to pick the right upgrade package for the specific version you're upgrading to. So again, you copy the database. This is just go ahead and copying that. You would then run some commands to massage and delete some data that's not supported in Azure SQL database. Once you've done that, you would run the SQL package to export that data. You would run a command line to import that into the Azure Blob storage. And then you'd run some final scripts to set some parameters and some database options, recreating the database users. And then, of course, you run the data upgrade scripts. These are from LCS. You download those and you run those, just like we talked about in the previous slide. We had some issues when we ran this. We had a few views and a few indexes that we had to drop. But once you've done that, you've done that. And then you can go ahead and test that, and then we rinse and do that in production. If you don't want to do the upgrade, you do have the option for manually migrating the data. So be familiar with the data entities. And again, a data entity is a logical view of a concept or a table. So for the customer table, there could be dozens of tables, and you don't need to know what those joins are, what those fields are. You just want to know, I want to work with customers. So Microsoft have created a data entity for customers. Think of this as a denormalized view that's not just read-only, but you can also write to that. So you can create customers, you can update customers, you can get a list of customers. You can use these data entities not just for data migration, but also ongoing integration if you want. Have a look at those, and what you will do is in 365, you have a option to view those entities, view the mapping, how they look, and actually start loading those in, importing those data entities in through the data package and running those. So that is also an option. So where's the pain in 2012? Well, from 2012, while there's a lot of differences, all the code now is XML based in Visual Studio. It's still X++. If you see a piece of code in 2012, you can read that same piece of code in 365, but there's a lot of differences. So lifecycle services, the data entities, the integrations, some of the new technologies, working with version control. Something that was optional in previous versions is now something you're going to have to be using. But on the positive side, the database schema in 365 is very, very similar to 2012 R3. All the concepts are there. Surrogate keys, financial dimension, inventory dimensions, released products for global address book. A lot of those concepts are still there. So if you're running 2012, you've got a real advantage there. Of course, this extensibility model, this is very, very recent. And again, when AX7 first came out, as it was known, it was kind of optional. So everyone jumped in and they said, okay, well, I'll do a customization. I can still do it. I'll overlay it. And we see from one of the earlier slides is Microsoft are now saying, well, we really don't want customizations. We want extensions. So you're going to have to move the mindset from an overlaying to an extensioning model. I think it's going to be a challenge for people that are running earlier versions of 365. And also I think it's going to be a challenge for some ISV solutions that have deep, deep hooks into the system through an overlaying. So I would say have a look at those, avoid overlaying at all costs. Version control, you will have to be familiar with that. So now you need one development machine per developer, each with their own version control hooked into that. So you're going to have to be using branching and merging and change sets and check-ins and creating check-in policies and tickets and linking to those and implementing a strategy on how you deploy code and work with version control. LCS is now mandatory. What is it? It's a collaborative workspace, provisioning environments, telemetry, monitoring, diagnostics, applying updates, supplying data, issues, support, and it's mandatory. So that's something that you will be heavily involved in as well. Familiarizing yourself with Visual Studio. If you've not, then that's something you're going to be in now. For 2012, yes, you would be in Visual Studio for SSRS reports. Now it is everything. Integrations, yes, look at the DMF, DIXF, look at what data entities are on data packages, OData, web services are still using. We had a customer that wanted to upgrade a 2012 web service to 365. They didn't think it was possible. They were using OData. And I worked with them and said, actually, there is. It's an upgrade path. We can do it. So I actually just upgraded the code, the web service code from 2012 to 365. And obviously embracing the cloud where we can. That's it.
All right, thank you, Michael. And we do have time for questions. A couple have come in already. Just pulling them up here. So the first question, going from 2012 R3 to 365, is there a point where you can modify what was in R3 before going into 365, such as procurement categories, changing the category to a new generic number, getting rid of those that were rarely used perhaps, or in fixed assets, only including active assets?
So I think this is data related. With the data packages that ship, you can modify those. So if you had a data package that you wanted to, export only key data from 2012, then yes, you can. You would just export that data into the package, only include what you want. For a full upgrade, you would get everything. So I don't know if the contents is, if you're looking at a full upgrade, full transaction history, or you only want to bring over key selected data. And if you want to bring over key selected data, then yes, you can, again, Microsoft have these packages on LCS, you download them, it can be an Excel file, for example. You only load in the data you want to, you create a package on that, you load it to 365 and you import it.
All right, great. And let me see here. Let me make a final call for questions. I only see one more in the queue at this point. And it's about integrations. If you have a custom 2012 integration, can it be upgraded to D365?
Good question. Excellent question. The upgrade landscape has changed, but there are multiple options. So it depends on what that integration is. Is it real-time synchronous? Is it a periodic batch job that runs periodically? Is it a direct database connection? Is it an EDI integration? There's various options. There is a session here for service endpoints. So let's take a look at this. So this tells you some of the deprecated features. So if you're running an AXD integration, that's gone, and that's been replaced by data entities. So you can still do it, but you have to refactor your code. So 365 supports OData and data entities to get data in and out. If you have a web service, which is your custom services, then yes, that's fully supported. So 2012 had the AOS hosted AIF web services. You can still do that. You can do that now in JSON. You can do SOAP and OData. So there's a bit of information on here on how to do that. If it's a direct database integration, CRM, I think Scribe was one, and earlier versions, then you're probably going to have to refactor that because the SQL Azure database does not support direct database connection. So there's a couple of sections here that you can go ahead and take a look at. And there's a data export import strategy. So they're saying, look, if what are you trying to do, and what are the options that we've got? Is it a custom service? Is it no data? Is it synchronous? Is it asynchronous? How many records do you expect to run? And based on that, Microsoft have got some recommendations. If it's an EDI integration, which is I think a common request, I think there's a webinar coming on in April about this one. and I will be attending to this because I'm really interested into the sort of the EDI landscape into 365. So there is a webinar, and I would recommend, if you want to learn more about EDI, that this would be a good place to start.
Well, that concludes our question list, and we are right at the top of the hour here, so a good time to wrap up. Michael, Amir, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and we will be wrapping up now. If you have any other feedback, please look for the survey that pops up at the end as you close out. Any other feedback you want to provide about your experience today is greatly appreciated. With that, we will conclude the event. Have a great day, everybody.